Hey everybody, welcome to this recorded module on probably one of my favorite topics, which is using the tools you already have that are built into your devices. So looking at your built-in accessibility features. I'm Mike Marotta. If you haven't watched any of my other recorded webinars, hello, nice to meet you. I have a handful that I've recorded. Hopefully you'll get a chance to go through all of them on some different topics. There's all my contact information. Feel free to reach out at any point through email, through Twitter, through my website, whatever it is. Questions, thoughts, comments, ideas, ways you could apply some of this information and implement it with the students you're working with. I'm happy to chat with you about anything and everything. If you want these slides, obviously you found the recording because you're watching it already, but if you'd like the slides that go with it, there's the link for the slides. So it's bit.ly/mmATP-A11Y. And that's a shortened term for accessibility, 11 letters in the word accessibility. So that tends to be a shortened term for that. So that'll get you to the slides. Some of the slides have links in them. There's some videos that are embedded in the slides. So if you go to that link, you'll be able to click on everything and explore those things on your own. So kind of four big spots we'll talk about when we think about accessibility features built in. We'll look at built-in features for your tablets and your smartphones. We'll talk about built-in features for your computers, whether it's a Mac or a Windows or a Chromebook. We'll talk about how you figure out how to match that to students' needs. So looking at those features, matching them to needs and bringing that together. And then finally some next steps as you go forward with this information. So our plan is we are going to spend this time, this half hour or so, give or take, looking at things that are in your device. So we're going to pop the hood on your devices. This is everything that comes with your devices. Nothing that we're going to talk about in this half hour is something you have to install or purchase or get. These are things that are already in there. Features that are built into your existing devices to help support vision and hearing needs, cognitive disabilities, learning disabilities, physical disabilities, all of those things on these features that are built in. These are the things that are at your fingertips. I'll give you a word of caution before we dive into all of them. A lot of the devices will categorize these features. These are tools for vision support. These are tools for physical support. I would say to you, ignore some of those kind of buckets they try to put things in, and instead look at the feature and what it does, and then match that to the need of the individual you're working with, to the student that you're exploring this with. Sure, adjusting text and line spacing and fonts might be powerful for someone with a visual impairment. It might also be powerful for someone with a learning disability or a cognitive disability. So I don't want you to get wrapped up in the idea of this is only for someone who is blind, because that's not the case. These tools and these features can be used for any number of reasons, for any number of people. So think broadly about these as we go forward. So we'll start with looking at tablets and smartphones and the features that are built into those devices. So we'll start with iOS. And again, I'm not going to say one is better than another as we move through this, but I have to admit iOS probably has the deepest feature set out of any of the built-in features that are there for accessibility. So this is your iPhone, your iPad, your iPod Touch. Those devices have a very rich, deep feature set. And so here's just some of them. We won't go through all of them today, but this is one of those opportunities where I'll show you a couple, and then I would say to you, pause the video and go explore. If you have your phone next to you, turn your phone on and dig in a little bit. I'll give you one critical word of advice, and I'll say it again at the end. When you play with built-in accessibility features, only turn one feature on at a time. Explore it, turn it off, then turn another one on. Don't get yourself in trouble by turning on everything and then exploring, because who knows what might happen there. You're going to be pretty safe if you turn one on, play around with a little, and turn it off. The tools also do a really nice job of giving you a little blurb, a little piece of information about what that does. Read that before you turn it on so you know what to expect with your device when it's actually on. So we'll dig through a couple of these. One of the powerful things in your iOS devices, and this is everything from 11 up in your devices, so depending on what kind of iOS device you have, you hopefully are in iOS 11 or up to 13 where we are now, you have that control center. On your iPad, you swipe down from the right corner. On your iPhone, you swipe up from the bottom. You get that control center where you can navigate through quickly some features that are there. Well, what's been really powerful in one of these updates that started in 11 and works to this day is Apple is dropping in some of the accessibility features right into the control panel. So I can turn things on like the magnifier right from the control center. I don't have to go into settings, accessibility, magnifier to turn it on. I can just go right to the control center and turn it on. I can set an accessibility shortcut right in the control center to instantly turn on one of the features. I can even turn on guided access, and we'll talk about what guided access is in a little bit. But some of those features right there, controlling the text size right there in the control center. You don't have to dig in further, which I think is really powerful. The other thing that's been a big change in iOS is that with iOS 13, they moved to a point where accessibility is its own menu item right on the home page in settings. You don't have to dig down in to find it anymore. It used to be under general and then accessibility and then all the settings. Now it's just on the main settings page right as accessibility, and off you go. So I'll show you a couple. When I think of a couple that I always show people, and I'm always thrilled that I get to show somebody something they've never known is even there, and that is the idea of using text-to-speech and speech-to-text. So when we think about text-to-speech, you have a couple options in your iOS devices. You have Speak Selection, where you highlight some text on the page, and then it gives you an option to read it. I'll show you the little video in a second. And then you also have something called Speak Screen, which you turn that feature on, and you swipe down from the top of the screen with 3 fingers, and then your device reads everything on the page. We'll give a little video demo. Hopefully it works.
It's safe, secure, and confidential. Your information and privacy are protected. Your response helps to direct billions of dollars in federal funds to local communities for schools, roads, and other public services.
So you see what happened there is you highlight some text, so you put your finger on it, gives you the little bubbles around it, you draw that out across what you want to be read. With that feature on, one of your choices in that toolbar automatically says speak. Click it and it reads. You see that there's dual color highlighting. You can change that. You can change the highlighting colors. You can change the voice. You can change the speed, all in the settings. But your end result is that this reads aloud for you right from the device. One of the other ways to get speech from a device, little different, is called Voiceover. And with Voiceover, that one is not text-to-speech, but instead is a screen reader. So it's going to read everything that's on the screen. Different because the Speak Selection that I just showed you was about text on a website or in an app, text that is accessible, that can be read. Voiceover is about reading all the elements on the screen. Let's see if the video plays and we'll get an example.
Voiceover on. CarPlay. United States Census 2020. Image. Navigation. Landmark. Menu. Button. And. Navigation. Collapsed. Menu. Expanded. Frequently asked questions. Link.
Instructions. Link. The 2020 census questionnaire should be completed by the person who owns or rents the living quarters.
So you heard a lot of information there. When it first turned on, you heard it say CarPlay. My phone was close enough to my car in the driveway that it actually connected, so it saw that. It gave you an anchor, which was that icon that was on the top left of the page that said 2020 Census. It told me there was a navigation button that was collapsed. I clicked it and it opened, and then it went through and gave me the links. It said frequently asked questions link, instructions link. I clicked instructions and it brought me to that page to read it. A lot more information coming my way than just strictly text. But that can be very helpful. Obviously, this is a feature for someone who's visually impaired or blind because it's giving you all the information from the page. You think about a device, if you were blind, one of our smartphones or tablets, it's a glass device. I have no idea what's on it. I don't know where the buttons are. I don't know where anything is. So it reads you everything. While it is a powerful feature for someone who's blind or visually impaired, some of my best users of VoiceOver are individuals I work with who have cognitive disabilities, who don't understand from sight what some of the items on the page are, but when they hear it announced, they understand what they can do. And it's a really interesting way to look at it. All of those elements on the screen, getting them the auditory information to know what it is that they're going to be clicking on and what is underneath that. So that's VoiceOver, a little different than reading your screen. We have speech to text. With Siri, you can ask it questions, you can write with it, those kind of things. Again, that is on every device. You have voice access in some way. Some of the other things on iOS that are powerful, you have something called Assistive Touch, which allows you to turn that on. You might have seen that little white button on some people's screen. A lot of times people find that when their home button breaks on an older iOS device because you can turn that on and control the buttons from the screen. But for someone who physically can't control buttons on a device, even though the device doesn't have many buttons on it, it does have some. And it does have some functions that require me to do 2-finger swipes, double taps, these kinds of things, where physically I might not be able to do that. I can do that all through icons that are on the screen now. And so that's Assistive Touch. It also lets you create custom gestures. So if there's a certain gesture that you have to perform in an app for it to do something, you could set that up as a custom gesture. With a simple tap on the screen, it will perform that gesture for you. So something to explore a little bit. I mentioned guided access before as one of the shortcuts that was in the control center. Well, guided access, what it is as a feature, is it allows you to lock someone into an app. So I can set this up so that you can't leave. You're in that app until either a timer runs out or I come over and put in a password, a passcode, and then it unlocks it. So if you have somebody that you're trying to keep them focused on a task, but they want to jump out and go on the web, or they want to go to YouTube and they want to watch videos or something like that, I can lock them in this. Perhaps it's a reading assignment that I want to give them the ability to go through text. The example on the screen was a reading assignment. And so with that, you were locked into that app, and then I could simply hold my finger down on the text and have it read aloud to me and move through that document until I was done. So guided access. None of the other devices really have guided access. This is one of those features of iOS that only lives in iOS. If you need physical access support, iOS does a very nice job with switch access. Lots of features. The ability to control multiple switches with scanning to automatically scan through choices. I can control timing. I can control the way these things respond back to me. I also can do something called create a switch recipe, which allows me to tell the device with a single switch, perform these tasks. So think about, you go to an app. You're going to go to an app, the Books app, and you're going to open your book and you want to be able to swipe to go to the next page. Well, if I can't physically do the swipe because I'm using a single switch and I'm hitting it with my fist and I'm just hitting it to move next page each time, I can't do the swipe. But I can set up a recipe that will say, open the book, touch the screen here, and swipe to the left. And so every time I hit the switch, it will perform that function. And then it will allow me to keep reading independently. So you can do multiple functions with single switch hits, and that's called a switch recipe. The important thing to remember about switches on any of the devices, even your computer devices, a lot of times we can't plug directly in. You're not plugging switches right into the device. Please don't try to plug a single switch into your iPad. It won't go anywhere. You'll only break everything. I don't know what, but you'll break everything pretty much. So be careful about that. You need some kind of intermediary device, which is what these on the screen are showing us, whether it's the tecla on the top or the hook on the bottom. Those are some kind of interface device that allow your switches to interact with your smartphone or tablet. Some of them are wireless, so the tecla at the top is wireless. I plug my switches into it and it wirelessly communicates with the iPad. So that's a nice one. That one's called the dose. What's really powerful about that one is that it'll work with an iOS device or an Android device with the flick of a switch. So if you have somebody who has multiple devices, they can use that same device in order to control both. The device on the bottom is the hook. That is for an iOS device with a lightning connector, and it physically connects to the device, and then I plug my switches into it. So it allows me to do that through a physical connection. Some of the things to think of with switches, what are you going to get access to? Is it just access within the app? Are you going to be able to control the whole device? Are you going to be able to control the menu and the functions within apps? So what is it you're trying to control? And make sure that you have that level of control with switches. A real good rule of thumb, which we've found, and by we it's the royal we of people in assistive technology, we found that if your app that you're using is Voiceover compatible, it will work with switches, because switches use the same functionality in the device that Voiceover does. So remember, we showed Voiceover a couple of minutes ago. So if you look on the App Store and it says that that app works with Voiceover, it will also be switch accessible. Not every app is switch accessible, so you need to check that and make sure before you start using it. We'll talk about Android a little. Android's features look very similar. They may be called something different, but they're very similar. One of the biggest issues with Android that we need to consider is, unlike Apple with their iOS devices, where every device runs the same operating system. If I have iOS 13 on my phone, it works exactly the same as your phone. All the same features are there. Android's a little different in that Android devices run on the Android platform, which is kind of an open platform, which allows manufacturers to customize the interface of the operating system, meaning that not every Android device looks the same. If you have an Android tablet, I just happen to have this one right here, that's a Samsung tablet. It has different features than a Kindle Fire, which is technically an Android tablet, but it runs very differently. It has a different operating system in it. They are both Android, but they run differently. And so you might not get every feature in every device. We also find historically Android tablets can be very inexpensive. $30, $40, all the way up to hundreds of dollars. Chances are high, if you have a $30 Android tablet, you are not going to get all the features. It may run an older version of Android, a earlier version of the operating system, which doesn't have all the features in it. So that's something we have to keep in mind also. Know the feature you're looking for, and then make sure that the device you're getting has that operating system to actually run that. Android has its own version of speaking text on the screen. It's called Select to Speak. What you'll see in a little bit is Chrome calls it the exact same thing. Chrome and Android are starting to have similar feature sets, both owned by Google, both having similar features. Same idea, select to speak. There's an icon on the screen, I click it, and then any text I select on the screen is read aloud to me. That is called select to speak in the Android devices. There is voice access, whether you're in just a general Android device or specific ones. They all have their own version of voice access. Same idea. Ask it questions, type text on the screen, so you have both of those functionalities in there. There is the ability to control switches on Android devices, but this becomes part of that trick. Your Android device has to be running at least Android 5.0, which is called Lollipop. They name everything after food. So if you go into your settings of your Android device, you have to go into the settings and look under the About, or whatever they might call it, and see, are they running at least Android 5.0? If you are, then you'll have switch access. If the device is running an earlier version of the operating system, you will not have switch access. All right, so those were kind of our mobile devices. Let's transition a little bit to our computers. We'll start with the Mac, and really the Mac and the iOS devices have almost the same feature set. They're very similar. We're starting to see kind of emerging in that platform. In fact, if you have one of the newer iPad Pros, it is very much like the Mac now. So it is very similar. So you'll get VoiceOver, the ability to speak text. You'll have switch control, magnification. You'll have these pieces in there the same way you had them in the iOS devices. In Windows, you have some features as well. Windows features are not as deep as some of the other devices. And it feels like, this is my own personal observation, it feels like Microsoft is putting less effort into updating the features of Windows with built-in accessibility, and instead building in accessibility features into their products. Microsoft Office has different accessibility in it. Things like OneNote have different accessibility features in it. So it feels like they're moving towards that kind of a product-based accessibility. But with that said, if you have a Windows computer, you have these features. You can go into the settings and you search for the ease of access menu, and you'll have all this. The narrator, which will read text aloud, magnifier and contrast for visual supports, captioning, different keyboard and physical access supports. If you're running a Windows 10 device, one of the newer ones, you'll also have an eye gaze functionality. So you'll have that as one of the updated accessibility features that you'll be able to start using. When we think about Chrome, I did an entire recorded module on maximizing your Chromebook, so I went into this a little deeper, but I'll give you just the snapshot of it right now. There are really deep accessibility features in your Chromebook. One of my first suggestions is to go into the settings and turn on the option that shows them in the system menu. So if you look on the screen, I've turned that feature on, and now when I click in my Chromebook where the time is, on the bottom right corner where your time and your Wi-Fi symbol are, you click there, one of your options in that pop-up menu is accessibility, and it allows you to turn these on quickly. If I want to turn on contrast, click the button and it turns on. I don't have to go into settings to do that each time. So that's a really nice feature. Really powerful for our students because they're typically not able to control control the settings in their own device. Right? They've been locked out of that from the accessibility from the administrator. And so what I would suggest is encouraging your administrator to turn that feature on for all your students. That way, when they go into the system menu, they can control that themselves. It's all about independence and letting people customize the experience for themselves, by themselves, to keep them more independent. So that's a good way to do it. I mentioned text-to-speech. With the Android devices called Select to Speak, same thing on the Chromebook. I can turn on Select to Speak. It gives me a little speaker at the bottom of the screen, and it allows things to read out loud. I highlight the text after I click the button.
Daniel H. Pink, the #1 best-selling author of Drive and to Sell is Human, unlocks the scientific secrets to good timing to help you flourish at work, at school, and at home.
So you see how that worked? It was a button click at the bottom to activate the feature. I select text with my mouse, with my cursor, and then it reads it, highlighting as it goes. It gave it a pink line around it, gave me the highlighting text as it went, and was able to read that from a web page. So a simple solution for text-to-speech, really powerful, built right into your Chromebook now. The other thing is dictation, built right in, which again, really powerful because it extends the usefulness of things like voice typing. We use voice typing in Google Docs. It's powerful, but it only works in Google Docs. So now we can control our
Here's a matching Google result.
Our computer. I'm sorry, I saw my other computer turn on because I said dictation, so sorry. You can control where the text goes using the dictation. I can go into any field that will allow me to type into it. I can turn that button on a Chromebook and dictate in now. So really powerful feature. Looking at your virtual on-screen keyboard has word prediction and dictation on it. So if you go to one of those options and pop up your on-screen keyboard from the built-in accessibility, you get some simple word prediction built in. A nice support for someone for writing. There is switch access on a Chromebook. Don't you feel it coming? But that switch access only allows you to control a switch accessible website. It is not about switch access for the device. So if you're a switch user, if the student is a switch user, at this point they would still need someone to set the Chromebook up for them, get them on a website, and turn all that on before the switches would activate and let them use it. One of the built-in features that does exist on the Chromebook is auto click. So now if they're a switch user, they can hit the switch to activate different things on the page. As it's moving around, there's an automatic click feature that if you wait for a predetermined amount of time, it will automatically select for you. So that's a nice feature that is built in as switch access. I'm throwing in Amazon products too. Why not? There is built-in accessibility in your Amazon products. If you have an Alexa, an Echo Dot, whatever you might have, those devices are voice activated, right? So there's kind of an accessibility feature right there. It's voice activated. But they also have some functionality to allow you to read books. If you have books in your Kindle library and you ask your Alexa to read it, it will pull that book from your library and start from where you stopped reading it. And it will just read it out loud. And it will read it with text-to-speech. So you have that functionality. There's a video on the slide you could always go back in and watch. And so now my Alexa is kicking on. You're getting a fun, full thing of everything. All my devices are kicking on as I talk. But that little video there will show you how it can read a book out loud to you. If you have a Kindle Fire tablet, those are very powerful devices. They're inexpensive, and they give us access to apps and the internet. So it's a nice option to get devices into the hands of students. What's really nice is that the Kindle Fire tablet has some accessibility built in. They have voice view and some other accessibility features that allow things to be read aloud to you. So it has that functionality, a nicer level than some of the older Kindle devices, which did not have this kind of level of accessibility. This is in the newer devices, has a really nice setup to provide some support for text-to-speech and support reading things out loud. So when we think about this idea, lots of features, I hope you paused it and you went out and explored your devices. It was sitting next to you a little bit. But what do we do with those features? Well, I think it showed up in every recorded module I did, the set framework, and it should, because we have to remember what's happening with the student in the environment, completing tasks before we look at tools. We have to remember this progression. We have to focus on this. Tell me about the student's needs and abilities, the environments. We're in this world where we're in virtual learning, we're in face-to-face, we're in some kind of blended environment. Our environments have changed. What does that change do for technology use? How does that change technology use? It's an interesting conversation that has to be had because no longer is it just about sitting in a classroom. It's a little of everything now we have to think about. Students are at home doing schoolwork. What is that environment like for learning? And then thinking about the tasks. The tools, we start with these built in. Use them until we can't use them anymore. Can you meet that student's needs with built-in before you buy something or before you start installing apps? Don't jump to apps first, but start here. Built-in accessibility features are awesome. Sorry, I realized that my captions were not running. Sorry. Built-in accessibility features are awesome until they're not awesome. They're powerful until they don't have enough power to meet the person's needs. But start there. You also have an opportunity with built-in features to see if something might work. I would almost call that like a proof of concept. Like, oh, this student responds to text-to-speech and it's helped them complete their educational assignment. We've seen that through the use of it in built-in accessibility. Other features that might help them might include the ability to change line spacing and font style and giving me a line focus on the screen. And those are all features that exist in other apps but are not part of the built-in accessibility. So you start to see where it worked up until a point, and then you start to identify other needs that the built-in doesn't meet, and then we move to something else. And so as we think about next steps going forward, what are you going to do with that? It's my built-in accessibility challenge. Here it is. Spread the word. Now you know. Show one feature to somebody else. Just something. It starts as easy as, did you know? Hey, did you know that your phone can read things out loud to you? No, tell me about it. Great, let me show you. And while you're there, dig through some of the other ones. The other thing about built-in accessibility features that I tell people is you can't be afraid of them. Just try them. Turn them on. Here's my my final reminder that I gave you in the beginning. I'll give you at the end. One at a time. One feature at a time. Turn them on, explore, turn it off, try something else. Once you understand how the different ones run, then you can turn them on at the same time. But if you try to do that all at once, you're not going to know what feature is controlling what. More importantly, you're not going to know what feature to turn off because maybe your device is not doing what you thought it would do. So try one at a time and explore them. Share it with someone else. Get this out there. One of my favorite stories of working with a consumer was showing her how to use speak selection and Siri on her phone. This was a young lady with a cognitive disability who was working towards being independent in the community with her phone. And she's a non-reader and she struggles to write. So what would happen is her mom would text her during the day, and because she couldn't read the text, she would have to turn to someone, including strangers at certain times, and say, can you read this to me? Person would read it to her. Hopefully there was luckily there was no bad story that ever came from this, because it is ripe for potential for bad stories, but it wasn't, thank God. She would turn to the person and she'd say, can you read this text to me? It's from my mom. They would read it to her, and then she would say to them, can you write back to her? And they would text her back. And this is how she would solve her problems. And so I showed her these solutions of having things read aloud and then having her dictate for the text. And I said to her, now you can listen to your mom's texts and reply back to her by yourself. And so she did this, and I didn't see her for a week. I would only go to that center once a week. And I remember the next time I came, I had a note, like a card from her mom. And her mom in the note said, if you teach her nothing else, you've done your job, because now she's independent with this feature. This is amazing, and we did not know it was built into her phone. And so that's the power of a built-in accessibility feature. And that's why we have to show that to people, because it can turn that around from being dependent on someone else to being completely independent for an activity. This young woman can do this for herself now from start to finish. She doesn't have to ask a single person. And it was all in her phone the whole time, and she didn't know it. So that's my little built-in accessibility story. That's why I feel so strongly about these built-in accessibility features and using them and showing them to people and spreading the word about how people can find this value from that. So I hope you found something powerful here that helped. I hope that I have empowered you to dig into your phone a little bit, or your tablet, or your computer. Explore a little bit. If you get stuck, or you're not sure how to do anything, or you're not clear on how to make this work for someone you're working with, reach out. There's all my stuff. I'm happy to chat with you. There's my email address, mike@mmatp.com, my website, mmatp.com, my Twitter handle, @mmatp. All of them will get to me. We will have a great conversation. I am game for anything. We can talk about any of these features or any of the other things you might see in the webinar. So I hope this was helpful for you, and good luck using technology, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for watching this webinar. For more information on the ATP Education Program, please visit our website at atp.nebraska.gov or email us at atp.education@nebraska.gov.